I'm Rachel Sterling, and 3 years ago, I learned that some people mistake kindness for weakness and compassion for failure. My ex-boyfriend and former best friend thought they were trading up when they left me behind for their ambitious life together. What they didn't realize was that while they were building their house of cards, I was building something that would outlast them both. Today, they're sitting in David's courtroom, facing the consequences of their choices, completely unaware that the judge deciding their financial fate sleeps next to me every night. They still think I'm just the naive volunteer girl who wasn't good enough for their world of designer bags and leveraged dreams. They're about to discover what real ambition looks like. 3 years earlier, the surprise party was supposed to be for my 28th birthday. I'd spent the afternoon volunteering at the legal aid clinic, helping elderly clients navigate housing disputes, then rushed home to what I thought would be a quiet evening with Marcus and a few close friends. Instead, I walked into my own apartment to find 30 people crowded around my dining table, champagne glasses raised, all staring at my best friend Veronica as she displayed the massive diamond ring on her finger. "Surprise!" she squealed, though the surprise clearly wasn't my party anymore. Marcus proposed. The room erupted in congratulations while I stood frozen in my doorway, still wearing my volunteer clinic polo shirt and carrying a canvas bag full of legal documents I'd been reviewing for pro bono clients. Marcus, my boyfriend of 2 years, couldn't meet my eyes. Veronica, my best friend since college, beamed like she'd just won the lottery, which, in her mind, she probably had. "I know this is unexpected," Marcus finally said, his voice carrying that patronizing tone I'd started noticing more often. "But Veronica and we just clicked on a different level. We want the same things." "What things?" I managed to ask. Veronica stepped forward, still glowing. "Success, Rachel. Ambition. A real future." She gestured around my modest apartment with its secondhand furniture and walls covered in thank you letters from legal aid clients. Marcus deserves someone who shares his drive, not someone who just volunteers all the time. The room fell silent. Everyone was staring at me, waiting for my reaction to this public humiliation disguised as an engagement announcement. "At my birthday party," I said quietly. "Oh, honey," Veronica's voice dripped with fake sympathy. "We didn't plan it this way. It just happened. You understand, right? You've always been so selfless." The way she said selfless made it sound like a character flaw. Marcus cleared his throat. "Rachel, you're an amazing person. But let's be honest, we were growing apart. You spend all your time helping other people instead of building something for yourself. Veronica gets it. She's got her real estate license, she's closing deals, making real money." "Real money," I repeated. "You know what I mean," he said defensively. "You work at that clinic for practically nothing, then spend your weekends doing more free work. That's not sustainable. That's not ambitious." I looked around at the faces of people I'd considered friends. Some looked uncomfortable, others nodded in agreement. They saw my volunteer work the same way Marcus did, as a hobby, not a calling. A waste of potential, not a purpose. "You're right," I said finally. "I'm not ambitious enough for you." I set my bag down and walked to the kitchen, returning with a bottle of champagne from my fridge. "Well then, let's celebrate your engagement properly." I popped the cork and poured glasses for everyone, playing the gracious host while my heart shattered. They thought I was being mature about it. Really, I was just buying time to process the betrayal. The party continued around me for 2 hours. I smiled, I congratulated them, I even helped clean up afterward. When everyone finally left, Veronica lingered by the door. "Rachel, I hope we can still be friends. I know this is awkward, but Marcus and we're just better suited for each other." "I'm sure you are," I said. "You'll find someone too. Someone who appreciates your charitable nature." After she left, I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by the debris of my birthday party that had become their engagement celebration. I should have felt devastated. Instead, I felt something else entirely. Clarity. The awakening. The next morning, I called in sick to the legal aid clinic for the first time in 3 years. Instead of helping clients, I spent the day researching something that had been nagging at me. Veronica's successful real estate career was built on a foundation I recognized from my work with housing disputes. Predatory lending practices. Overpriced properties sold to first-time buyers who couldn't afford them. Partnerships with mortgage brokers who specialized in subprime loans. Marcus had left his stable job as an accountant to become her business partner 6 months earlier. Together, They were flipping houses in low-income neighborhoods, displacing long-time residents and gentrifying communities without any regard for the people they were hurting. They called it success. I called it exactly the kind of exploitation I'd been fighting against for years. But instead of feeling righteous anger, I felt something else. Opportunity. That afternoon, I drove to the law school I'd graduated from 4 years earlier. I found Professor Sterling in his office, grading papers and looking exactly as distinguished as I remembered from his constitutional law classes. "Rachel," he said, looking surprised but pleased. "It's been a while. How's the legal aid work?" "Eye-opening," I said. "Professor Sterling, I need advice. If someone wanted to go from legal aid volunteer to actually changing the system, what would you recommend?" He leaned back in his chair. "That depends. Are we talking about policy work? Academia? Private practice with a social justice focus?" "All of the above. I want to build something bigger than just helping one client at a time. I want to create systemic change." His eyes lit up. "Now that's ambitious thinking. Have you considered combining legal advocacy with policy reform? There are some innovative models emerging, legal aid organizations that also lobby for legislative change, provide community education, and even develop affordable housing solutions." We talked for 2 hours. By the time I left his office, I had a reading list, 3 conference recommendations, and an invitation to attend a roundtable discussion on housing policy the following week. I also had David Sterling's personal phone number, which he'd given me, in case I had more questions about the field. I called him 2 days later. We met for coffee to discuss housing law. Coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into long walks talking about justice, ambition, and what it really meant to build something meaningful. 6 months later, we were engaged. A year after that, we were married. David had been appointed to the federal bankruptcy court by then, and I was finishing my master's degree in public policy while launching Sterling Legal Advocacy, a nonprofit that combined direct legal services with policy reform and community development. The name wasn't a coincidence. Building the empire. While Marcus and Veronica were busy flipping houses and posting Instagram photos of their entrepreneur lifestyle, I was quietly building something that would outlast both of them. Sterling Legal Advocacy started small. Just me and 2 part-time attorneys working out of a shared office space. But we had a different approach than traditional legal aid. We didn't just help individual clients. We identified patterns in their cases and used those patterns to push for systemic change. When we noticed a spike in predatory lending cases, we didn't just help the victims. We tracked down the mortgage brokers and real estate agents involved, documented their practices, and reported them to regulatory agencies. We also lobbied for stronger consumer protection laws and provided financial literacy education to vulnerable communities. When gentrification started displacing longtime residents, we didn't just fight individual evictions. We helped communities organize, connected them with housing advocacy groups, and pushed for inclusionary zoning policies that would preserve affordable housing. The work was harder than volunteering had ever been, but also more effective. We were preventing problems instead of just treating symptoms. 2 years in, we'd grown to 15 full-time staff members and had satellite offices in 3 cities. Major foundations were funding our work. Law schools were sending us their brightest graduates. Politicians were returning our calls. Meanwhile, through David's work on the bankruptcy court, I was learning about the other side of the equation. I saw the cases that came through his courtroom. Over-leveraged investors, failed businesses, people who'd gotten in too deep chasing quick profits. I started recognizing patterns there too. The reckoning. The first sign of trouble came through my network of housing advocates. They'd started seeing a cluster of foreclosure cases, all linked to the same real estate partnership. Properties that had been flipped multiple times, sold to buyers who couldn't afford them, then abandoned when the buyers inevitably defaulted. The partnership was called Veromar Investments. Veronica and Marcus. I could have felt vindicated, but instead I felt sad. Sad for the families who'd lost their homes. Sad for the communities that had been destabilized. Sad for the naive belief I'd once had that my former best friend and ex-boyfriend were just misguided, not actively harmful. The second sign came 6 months later, when David mentioned an unusual bankruptcy case coming across his docket. "Young couple," he said over dinner. "Real estate investors who got in way over their heads. 7-figure debt, no assets except a bunch of underwater properties. The wife keeps calling the clerk's office crying about how they didn't know what they were doing. What's the case name? I asked, though I already suspected. Jameson versus Veromar Investments. The husband is Marcus Jameson, wife is Veronica. They're representing themselves because they can't afford an attorney. I set down my fork. David, I need to tell you something. I explained the whole history, the birthday party betrayal, their condescending dismissal of my work, the way they'd built their success on practices I'd been fighting against for years. David listened without judgment, then shook his head. The irony is incredible. They're facing bankruptcy because of exactly the kind of predatory practices your organization works to prevent. What happens next? Well, I have to recuse myself, obviously. This is a clear conflict of interest. I grabbed his hand. No, don't. He looked surprised. Rachel, I can't preside over your ex-boyfriend's bankruptcy hearing. That would be completely inappropriate. You can if they don't know who I am, I said. Your nameplate just says the Honorable David Sterling. They have no idea I'm married to you. They don't even know I got married. We kept it out of social media, remember? David frowned. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that for once, I want them to see what real ambition looks like. Not the grasping, destructive kind they mistook for success. The kind that actually builds something lasting. He was quiet for a long moment. You know I can't show them any favor or disfavor based on your personal history. I don't want you to. I just want you to do your job. Apply the law fairly. Follow the procedures. Let them see that the system they tried to game has consequences. And if they recognize you in the courtroom? I smiled. Then maybe they'll finally understand what they walked away from. The hearing. The bankruptcy hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in David's courtroom. I arrived early, dressed in my best suit with my hair pulled back professionally. I carried a briefcase full of policy documents I was reviewing for a legislative hearing later that week. To any observer, I looked like just another attorney there on business. Which, in a way, I was. Marcus and Veronica arrived 20 minutes before their hearing, looking haggard and desperate. Marcus wore a wrinkled suit that was probably expensive once. Veronica clutched a designer handbag, but her usual perfect makeup couldn't hide the stress lines around her eyes. They sat in the front row of the gallery, whispering nervously to each other. I chose a seat 3 rows behind them, close enough to hear their conversation, but far enough away to avoid immediate recognition. I still can't believe it came to this, Veronica was saying. We were so close to making it work. The market shifted, Marcus replied. We couldn't have predicted the interest rate changes, the tighter lending standards. It's not our fault. I almost laughed. Interest rate changes and lending standards were exactly the kind of market factors that legitimate real estate professionals monitored constantly. Their failure to account for basic economic realities was just more evidence of their fundamental unseriousness. At exactly 10 a.m., the bailiff called for all to rise. David entered the courtroom in his robes, commanding and dignified. He took his seat behind the bench, and I felt a surge of pride watching him. Good morning, he said. We're here for the matter of Jameson versus Veromar Investments. I am Judge David Sterling, and I'll be presiding over these proceedings. I watched Marcus and Veronica exchange glances at the mention of his name, but they clearly didn't make any connection. To them, Sterling was just another surname, not the name I'd taken when I married the man who now held their financial future in his hands. Mr. and Mrs. Jameson, David continued, I understand you're representing yourselves in this matter. Before we begin, I want to confirm that you understand the seriousness of these proceedings and your rights as debtors. For the next hour, I listened as David methodically worked through their case. The numbers were staggering. Over $2 million in debt, secured by properties now worth less than half what they'd paid for them. Mrs. Jameson, David said, reviewing their financial statements, can you explain to the court how Veromar Investments determined the purchase prices for these properties? Veronica's confident facade cracked. We relied on comparative market analysis from our realtor network. We thought the neighborhoods were up and coming. Marcus said, we didn't want to lose the deals. The market was moving fast. David asked, Mr. Jameson, how did you plan to pay back the loans on these houses? Marcus looked nervous. We thought prices would go up quickly. We wanted to sell them within 6 months. To whom? Mostly to first-time buyers and young families. I felt angry. These buyers often got hurt when deals like this failed. Marcus and Veronica treated buying homes like gambling. David kept asking questions. They had taken many risky loans to buy expensive homes. Then they sold those homes to buyers with bad credit using tricky loans. When buyers couldn't pay, Marcus and Veronica were stuck with big debts on homes losing value. This was a clear case of predatory lending, taking advantage of people, something my group, Sterling Legal Advocacy, fights against. Veronica said, "We didn't want to hurt anyone. We just wanted to help people buy homes." David asked if she knew what predatory lending meant. She said yes, but claimed they always explained everything clearly. David showed a contract where one buyer paid way more for a house your company bought cheaper, just weeks earlier. Marcus said they spent money on repairs, but the buyer couldn't pay, and the house was auctioned for less than they bought it. The buyer, Mrs. Rodriguez, was a single mom we tried to help, but we couldn't save her home. The judge ruled Marcus and Veronica must declare bankruptcy. They lost everything and faced years of debt. After court, Veronica saw me and was shocked. I told her I'm married to the judge and work to protect people from scams like theirs. Marcus begged for help. I said no, the judge follows the rules, and so do I. Veronica accused me of setting this up, but I said they made bad choices and hurt people. I explained how my group fights to stop foreclosures and helps families like theirs. Marcus looked guilty. I said they didn't want to see the harm they caused. I told them real ambition means making the world better, not worse. 6 months later, David said Marcus was working as a cashier, looking sad. A year later, my group got a government grant to fight predatory lending. I spoke about building honest businesses that help people. I don't forget Marcus and Veronica, or the families they hurt. True ambition isn't about quick money or bankruptcies. It's about building something real that lasts.